Thanks, everybody, and thanks for inviting me to come and speak. We've had a couple of PowerPoint presentations, and I'm not going to do a PowerPoint presentation. I'm just going to talk with you a little bit. Thank you. As Richard said, I was a reporter for a long time. I was a reporter for about 20 years, over 20 years. And I covered this movement for about 7 or 8 of those 20 years. That's okay. Sure. Thank you. You know, because I was a journalist for a long time, and I still consider myself a journalist, I can say that yes, I made every effort to be balanced and accurate in my reporting, but there are a lot of stupid and lazy and intellectually dishonest and corrupted journalists out there. You know, we hold these truths to be self-evident. So I'm not going to demonstrate any more of these self-evident truths to you, but I do encourage everyone to push back against bad reporting. And I want you to understand this. A lot of reporters and editors have lost their jobs in the past year, and there's a lot of fear in the business. And a lot of reporters are afraid to publish and report balanced stories about the drug war, and a lot of editors will go in and edit their stories in an unfair and unbalanced way because they're afraid of losing their jobs too, and maybe they're afraid of ticking off the publisher who maybe sits on the board of directors of a couple of companies that oppose drug law reform. It's a very complex issue, very complex issue. So appreciate the complexity. Now, when I was doing a lot of drug war reporting, I covered a lot of raids, and I covered a lot of police actions, and I was in federal court a lot covering these issues. And after many years of this, I got really frustrated, and I decided to do something different. And I joined a group called the Human Rights Data Analysis Group. And this group is based in Silicon Valley. We're a nonpartisan group of mostly statisticians and mathematicians and programmers who are supported by large foundations. And we go around the world and we collect data on large-scale human rights violations around the world. And we make this data available to prosecutors, and this data is analyzed to be scientifically defensible. And we're really proud of the work that we do. Our data has been used, for instance, in 9 Truth and Reconciliation Commissions, including the one in South Africa. We provided the data that was used to prosecute Slobodan Milosevic. And we are now involved in some very large human rights data gathering projects in Liberia, where I spent a lot of this summer, and in Colombia, where I'm going to be spending a fair bit of time coming up in the next couple of years. Now, of course, I was happy to see the human rights situation in Colombia raised during the presidential debates in the comment that Obama made about labor leaders being killed and disappeared in Colombia, and we are working with our partners in the human rights community in Colombia to try to figure out how many people have been killed and disappeared and kidnapped in Colombia. And that is a very worthy project. Now, the thing about data collection is that we encourage creative data collection. We, for instance, in helping our human rights partners estimate how many people, for instance, might be imprisoned in China, we say, well, track how much food is going into a certain prison in China and how many goods are coming out of that prison, and maybe we can get a sense of how many people are in that particular prison in China. We tried to figure out how many people were, you know, the victims of human rights violations in Kosovo. We looked at border records, how many people went over a border at a certain time. So we do a lot of creative data gathering, and I encourage you to think about creative data gathering as well. You know, it's been my observation that the challenges that human rights groups face around the world are in some ways very similar to the challenges that this community faces here. And I want you to think about that a little bit. And I would like you to think about also what I think is one of the most interesting stories about the medical marijuana and drug reform movements to come out this year. And it's the story about the federal court ruling in August in the case of the County of Santa Cruz versus Casey, which recognized that, and I'm quoting from the ACLU press release here, the calculated pattern of federal enforcement can render the state medical marijuana laws effectively inoperable, which violates the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Now, the court ruled that once deliberate interference is proven, it would be unconstitutional. So, how do you prove a calculated pattern of federal interference? That's a really interesting challenge. And of course, there's lots of anecdotal evidence, but again, I encourage you to think about data collection and the kind of data collection that, of course, I would maybe think about in this particular court ruling would be data collection about raids, arrests, prosecutions, seizures of medical cannabis from patients, shutting down of dispensaries, abuse of patients and caregivers. This is the kind of data that the court is really asking for to prove a pattern. And since I now work really full-time in proving patterns of human rights violations, I would like to invite you to do some creative data collection. Now, thank you. Now, I want to say a couple of things about data collection. When we encourage our human rights partners to collect data in the field in places like Colombia, obviously they face certain risks. They have to protect the safety of the witnesses who are witnesses to human rights violations. And we have developed a software tool called MARTIS, M-A-R-T-U-S. You can read about it on martis.org. MARTIS is the Greek word for witness. It's a tool that helps human rights organizations when they're collecting field data on their laptops, encrypt the data on their laptops, and back it up to servers outside their country. The data is encrypted in transit, and it's encrypted on the servers as well, and the human rights groups can access this data. So I'm going to tell you here that you have to be careful in collecting data, because when you collect data, you can be vulnerable. The human rights groups we work with had situations in Colombia where someone points a gun at them and says, "Give me your laptop." And if they did, of course, and they had that data in an unencrypted form, they would essentially be giving those people a hit list of people to go and kill. So I urge you to do safe data collection, to respect the witnesses, and also think twice about social networking. I loathe social networking. I don't do Facebook. I don't do LinkedIn. I don't Twitter or blog my present location. If I'm going somewhere and I don't want to be tracked by my cell phone, I take the battery out. You have to defend the witnesses. And I take that very seriously. So, you know, I consider social networking another form of surveillance in a pretty package. Think twice. I don't want people to know who my friends are or how many friends I have. Thank you very much. And I also, I want to leave you with a couple of really quick examples of stories where I think data collection is an important element here. For instance, the surge in marijuana arrests in 2007 for California. You know, that story is a really interesting story, and I think it should be pursued. Felony arrests for sales and cultivation up 19%, arrests in California up 13%, record number of marijuana arrests throughout the country. What are the costs of these arrests and law enforcement actions? What is the cost in your community? You know, how much is your local community law enforcement organization getting from the feds, and how much do they spend to engage in this? There was a really good story, actually, in the Washington Post about how neither Obama nor McCain are really discussing, you know, the expanding prison culture and how much it costs to prosecute. Every 100 Americans is now imprisoned. $200 billion annually. Well, if you want to cut some money out of